Good morning. This is Kelly from Kelly's Coffee and Crime Chat. I'm so sorry I am late again this week. I had a fall yesterday on the stairs, icing my knees, so I am laid up right now. I'm not in my usual room, so I'm hoping that you can hear me okay. I am drinking Java Mama from Mama's Picks. Sorry, I just lost what the title was. Fall Baking is the name of the coffee, and it is part of our September Mama's Picks. If you guys have ever had the chocolate peanut butter blossom cookies, they're the peanut butter cookies with the Hershey's Kiss in the center. That's what this coffee tastes like. It is wonderful. Mama's Picks are 3 coffees with free shipping. You also get the cinnamon apple, which I'm going to try tomorrow, and another one called Changes, which is just a fall coffee unflavored. I'm curious to try the other 2, but boy, this one is, if you love peanut butter and chocolate, this is your coffee. So yummy. And the Mama's Sips this month are the teas, and they are so good. I mean, they sound good. I have not ordered them. You can get all 6 in the ultimate box as well. Okay, I'm trying to get comfortable with my knees. I don't know if I've heard about this story. It seems like it's familiar to me, but it's the Bender family. CrimeReads.com, Murderpedia.org, and Wikipedia.org are my sources. I'm so hoping you can hear me. I don't have my microphone right now because it's upstairs, and it's very hard for me to go up and downstairs right now. So I'm kind of testing this. If it comes out okay, I'll upload it. John Bender, his wife Elvira, they had a son and daughter. John Jr. and Kate is the daughter. Labette County, Kansas is where this takes place, and it is 7 miles northeast of Cherryville, Kansas. Cherryville was founded in 1871, and this is the year that this happens. Back then, a lot of the counties and states and that weren't established with names. So when the government, this is after the Civil War, when the government moved the Osage Indians from Labette County to a new area that would eventually become Oklahoma, the land that they vacated was open to homesteaders. So the Benders were one of these families. They had 160 acres. And it was by the only open road for going west. That's where their home was going to be. And the road going west was the Great Osage Trail, and it was the only open road is where they lived. John was 60 years old. Him and John Jr. built a cabin there, a barn, and a well in 1871. Elvira was 42. She was the wife. And Kate, they planted a 2-acre garden and apple orchard. So they had all their vegetables and their apples right there. The cabin was divided into 2 rooms by a canvas wagon cover. So it's basically like you got your little cabin, and it's kind of like putting a curtain in between the house to separate it. The smaller part was where they lived, and the bigger part was for a general store and an inn, so people could stay. Now, this just sounds like the American dream, especially back then. I'm thinking, this isn't a bad deal to do this, you know. Well, John Jr. wasn't good with John Sr., the dad, was not good with English. He was actually born John Flickinger, and they were German. Now, back then, I know some people did change their names because it was hard to pronounce. I've heard this anyway in English. So Bender, I guess, would have been easier. I'm not sure, but they were German immigrants. Elvira was not a friendly woman. Neighbors often called her she-devil. Now, she had been married several times and had 12 children with one husband. She would marry, this is the deal, she would marry after her husband of the time died of head injuries every time. So she was married several times, and every time they would die of a head injury, and then she would get remarried. A little suspicious there, maybe? Now, Kate, the daughter, spoke English very well and claimed to be a psychic and healer. She could basically heal illnesses, is what she said. She was big with seances and advertised with flyers around the area. And, back then, that would be pretty cool to do because I'm sure people would, back then, you didn't really, it's not like you had TV, you didn't have the internet. I don't even know if they had a radio in the 1800s. Maybe they did. I don't know. Doesn't seem like they would. So you didn't really know about a lot of this stuff, about people, making it up or being frauds. You didn't hear about that back then. So that actually wouldn't be a bad job, to have and just have people, you can do their readings for them. And some people do have that gift, but I'm saying if you didn't, which I don't know if Kate really did or not. I think it was all, a fluke. But she also went to Sunday school with John Jr., so they actually went to church. Now, she was all for free love and even did lectures, which I didn't realize they had lectures back then. But she did lectures, and the lectures, one of them, she was quoted by saying, "Why smother her brother's love for her?" So it was rumored around town that they were actually common law husband and wife, but they were brother and sister. So it's like, oh my gosh. Okay. Kate was actually one of the 12 children that Elvira had with her husband. His last name was Griffith. So she was actually born Eliza Griffith. And she had the last name as Davis once. So she was actually called Kate Davis. Now, I don't know if she was married before. I never found out. But it sounds to me like she doesn't get married. She just does the common law thing. But anyway, she carried the name Davis one time. And then John Jr. had Gebhardt as his last name when he was born. So Gebhardt. So I guess when they changed their name to Bender when they came to America, that's just what they did. Now, southeast of their property, which would later become Montgomery County, was called Drum Creek. And in May of 1871, a body was found there. A man named Jones, basically Mr. Jones. His throat was cut and his skull was crushed. 2 more bodies were found with these same injuries the following year. Now, it was big with horse thieves around the area back then, and they would, vigilante committees were actually put together, and they would arrest people. Now, they're not real arrests, so they're quote-unquote arrests. I guess like a citizen's arrest or whatever is what they call it now. But vigilante committee, can you imagine that going on today? But they were not real arrests, so these people were let go. And they were also run out of the area by these committees when they were found innocent because they didn't want them around because, of course, they probably believed that they were guilty. In 1872, George Newton Longcor, that's Longcor, left Kansas for Iowa with his baby daughter, but they didn't make it. They disappeared. His neighbor was a Dr. William York. He went to look for him and talked to the homesteaders to see if they saw George and his baby. He left to return home after talking to them. He too disappeared. Dr. York's 2 brothers, Ed, and there was an Ed York, and then his other brother was Alexander York, who was a colonel. He was a Civil War vet and a lawyer. He started searching with 50 other men to find his brother. They questioned everyone and got to the Bender's Inn on March 28th, 1873. So this is 1873. So they got there and asking if they saw his brother, which was one goes looking, the other one goes looking. I mean, this is almost like a movie, it reminds me of. And there's some other things that this reminds me of later. But Dr. William York is who they were looking for. And they asked if they'd seen his brother. And the Benders said that Dr. William York stayed there and mentioned having trouble with Indians. Okay, let's just blame Native Americans, people. Okay, the colonel thought this was likely to happen. Here we go. Back then, that's what you thought. And so he went ahead and stayed at the Benders Inn and had dinner. Well, he stayed there to eat. I don't think he stayed there overnight. Now, at least I never did find out. But anyway, he stayed there and ate dinner. He went back there on April 3rd with a backup after a woman told him that Elvira threatened her with knives. Elvira claimed to not understand English. But then when the colonel repeated the claim again, Elvira was angry, saying that woman was a witch who cursed her coffee. Sorry. I read that and I had to laugh. Cursed her coffee. How do you curse coffee? I don't know. I don't know. But anyway, she was a witch that cursed her coffee. And she told them to leave. This is Elvira's account. She told these guys to leave. She told the colonel to leave, all the guys that he brought there to leave. They knew then she could speak English pretty well after this. So Kate told him to come back by himself on Friday night, and she'd use her psychic abilities to help him find his brother. The men with him knew the Benders were guilty of this. They just knew they were. So they brought together a meeting at a schoolhouse and all agreed to get a search warrant. Okay, just a minute. I got to get a drink of my fall baking coffee. Okay. Nobody was keeping track of the Bender family. They too disappeared, abandoning the inn. The animals were not fed. I was so worried about that myself. I mean, that's just ridiculous. They just left. This was noticed by someone that just happened to go past the property and saw that the animals were not fed. Oh, sorry, I had to take a drink. Okay, a search party was put together for the Benders' property once the weather cleared, because it was in the wintertime and they couldn't get to it. So they found their belongings and that their food were gone. So all their belongings were gone and the food. And they could smell a horrible odor. And they actually found a trap door nailed shut in the floor under a bed. They got it open and found a left. I can't read my handwriting. They got it open and found a 6-foot deep empty room with blood clotted on the floor. Now, they broke up the stone slab with the sledgehammers, but there was nothing underneath. Not even when they lifted the cabin itself. They lifted the whole cabin and moved it and dug under it. And even though the floor was just had blood on it, they didn't find anything. So they went around the property to the garden and the apple orchard. They found Dr. William York's body face down, barely below the surface of the ground. I don't know. Okay, well, wait a minute. Let me go on. They went until midnight and found 9 more graves, but they didn't dig them up yet until the next morning. So the next morning, they had to get their sleep. And then the next morning, they found 8 bodies in 7 of the 9 graves. One was found in a well, 1 body. And there were also many body parts found. It wasn't found out who these body parts belonged to. All but one of them had their heads smashed with a hammer and throats cut. And it was the one little girl who was either strangled or buried alive. They're speculating because she had no marks on her or no injuries. This was the little girl who was buried with her dad. The long, I can't read my handwriting. The longer guy, the first guy that went, and then his neighbor was Dr. William York. He was the one who left with his baby. I was trying to find the last name now in my notes, but if you remember who, I just want to make sure that everybody knows who I'm talking about. But anyway, I'm sorry, I can't find it. I'm looking, but Longcor, Longcor. Gosh, I tell you, I get to writing and I'm writing so fast that it's hard for me to like read it after I'm done. It's so bad. But that's who were buried together. If anybody has ever heard, because my parents used to say this all the time, this expression, hell's half acre. That's what somebody had dubbed this, hell's half acre. And I'm thinking that that's what that came from. That saying, well, I'm not going to look over hell's half acre for him. He's way over on the other side of the building, that kind of thing. So my parents used to say that all the time. And I said it one time and long years ago when the guy I was with, he started cracking up laughing. He's like, I've never heard of that. I'm like, really? I said, oh yeah, hell's half acre. Well, I think that's where this came from, and which I thought was pretty interesting. The crowd of people in the area hung a man from a beam in the inn, somebody they thought was guilty. He was just an onlooker when they were going through the search party was going through the house and digging up. Well, they hung him from a beam until he was unconscious. And then when he woke up, they hung him again, they interrogated him and then hung him again. And they ended up letting him go after the third hanging. He was like I said, he was just one of the onlookers. But they thought he was guilty because he was standing there watching. So let's just hang people until they're unconscious and then bring them back and then do it again. They found a Roman Catholic prayer book in the cabin with notes in German. They translated them to, quote, Johanna Bender, Johannah. I don't know who that is. And then it says, born March 7th, 1848, John Gebhardt, came to America on July 1st, 18-something. They couldn't read the other two numbers or translate it or read it. And then another quote, Big Slaughter Day, January 8th. And then another quote, Hell departed. Everyone heard about the murders, and the Bender cabin was destroyed by hunters who took everything. Now, these people took bricks and stones. I'm going to get to this later because there's a reason for this. Rewards were issued for the Benders' capture. And what was speculated as to what really happened inside the place was that the Benders would seat their guests at a table. The rich people, the people that were wealthy basically, would come into the inn and they would give them like the seat of honor or something like that. And it was the one that was behind or in front of the wagon cover, which was the curtain when I said the place was separated into two areas and they would put that wagon cover curtain, whatever. I mean, they called it a curtain in one of the sources. And they would sit that table in front of that curtain. So right behind that curtain is where the Benders lived. That was the living quarters. Well, this was positioned over a trap door to the cellar. Like I said, two different sources gave me two different accounts of this. One had the cellar, the trap door under the table. The other source I read said that they drugged them to the cellar door. That was in a different area. So Kate would distract the guests with her psychic abilities and her beauty because she was very beautiful, I guess, and could charm the men. And John Sr. or John Jr. would be behind that curtain. And they would come up behind them, hit them in the head with a hammer. Then Elvira or Kate, one of them, would cut their throat just to make sure they were dead. And then they would drop through the trap door to the cellar. And this reminded me of Sweeney Todd. If anybody has ever seen that, the play or the movie, that's exactly what came to mind when I read this. Then they would strip the body and bury them. They did find bullet holes in the door, in the roof and walls of the room, which made people think that the victims tried to fight back. They never mentioned a gun or bullets, though. I never heard anything about that, just bullet holes that were found in the cabin. They found the Bender's wagon after following the wagon tracks, and their starving horses 12 miles north of the inn. They found that they bought train tickets for Humboldt, and I think Humboldt is I know there's a Humboldt in Nebraska, but they found train tickets for Humboldt. John Jr. and Kate left and got a train to Texas. Back then, you would take a train to this one, a train to this one, a train to another train. It wasn't kind of like planes now, where you fly and you got to have a layover and get another plane. So that's kind of how trains were back then. Now, John and Elvira went from Humboldt to Kansas City and got tickets to St. Louis. Now, during this whole search of them, they found out that John Jr. died of apoplexy, Apoplexy. And I looked that up, and it said it was a burst blood vessel, and usually in the brain. It made me think of an aneurysm. Apoplexy, I think is how you say it. Rumors were that a vigilante group found and shot the Benders and burned Kate alive. Now, rumors were flying everywhere. Even before the days of TV and social media, there were rumors. Of course, I think they always had some kind of newspaper printed up, I would think. Another group said that they got them and lynched them and threw them into a river. None of these were proven. Another rumor was that one had gotten them into a gunfight and buried them, shot them or killed them in a gunfight and buried them. But nobody ever claimed their rewards. It was $3,000 then, and today it would be over $60,000, probably more than that. So nobody claimed the rewards. It's like, if you got them, wouldn't you bring them in and get this money? At least that's what I would do. The search continued over 50 years. John Flickinger, who was John Sr., committed suicide in 1884, and I never found out how. October 31st, Halloween of 1889, a Mrs. Elmira Monroe. Now, Elmira is like Elvira, and Monroe was one of her married names out of the husbands that she had at one time. So Elmira Monroe and Mrs. Eliza Davis were arrested in Niles, Minnesota, which is also known as Detroit or mistaken for Detroit. Mrs. Davis admitted, or I should say actually called Detroit, not really mistaken. Mrs. Davis, Eliza Davis, if you remember that name from earlier, admitted that Elmira was Elvira Bender and that they both were extradited to Oswegos, Oswegos, for trial. Now, the trial was held over. It was scheduled, but then it was held over. And then they couldn't board the two ladies because of the expense. So they let them go. This I didn't get because there was no proof they were the Benders. So they just let them go. There was no proof. They didn't believe that they were them. Well, it's kind of funny they're using their names. Or are they just saying that they're them? Why they would, I don't know why you would lie and say you were these people. It just doesn't make sense to me. The trial was held over. Oh, I already read that. Okay, three hammers. Now, this is where I'm going to get to the stones and the bricks taken. So we got souvenirs, the stones that line the well, the bricks that line the cellar walls, and a stained knife. Now, these were souvenirs that people took, plus hammers. They took them for themselves as souvenirs. Tourists would come and see the place. Now, it was destroyed, but this would have been before it was destroyed. A stained knife now belongs to the Kansas Historical Society. There were 3 hammers that were gifted to the Cherryvale Museum in 1967 and displayed there. It was there was a notary certified by Cornelius P. Dick. He is the son of Leroy Dick, and Leroy Dick is an elected township officer. He was the one who called for the search party of the cabin. So he took the 3 hammers, and they are now in the Cherryvale Museum. This is considered one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the Old West. And there is kind of a fact here. I'm going to get to the victims in a minute, but there's some facts here I want to talk about first because I want to leave the victims to the very end. Lori Ingalls Wilder, if anybody knows her, Little House on the Prairie, she was a real person. And she claimed that her dad, who she called Pa, was one of the was one part of one of the vigilante hunts in this. He said they would never be found. This was in her biography is where this was taken. And then there's a show called Supernatural. I have never seen it, but I heard it's very good. If anybody's seen it, let me know, because I might start watching that. Supernatural featured a family of killers named the Benders. So that's who they were based on, and it must have been an episode. I don't know if it was one episode. And then there were two main characters in a video game called Red Dead Redemption that were modeled after John Jr. and Kate Bender. And I don't know the video game thing. But so this is really something. If you have heard of this, let me know. I mean, it seems like the name sounds familiar, the Benders. I know the name, but I didn't know the details of this. Now, the victims are here in disappearance of the order of when they disappeared. 1869, Joe Sowers. Now, he's not proven to be the first victim, but he was the first one that disappeared. 1871, Mr. Jones. That was found in Drum Creek. Found on the prairie in 1872 were two unknown men. In the apple orchard, 1872, Henry Mackenzie. Ben Brown, William F. McCrotty, Mccrotty. And in 1873, George Long, that's the one I always have trouble with, and the baby girl. I don't know if it's Longcore or Longcore, if I'm saying that right, and the baby girl. 1873 also, John Boyle was found in a well. Also in the apple orchard, John Greery, an unknown female, and an unidentified male. In 1873, in the apple orchard, Dr. William York. Also parts of several victims. So I wanted to name those off, these victims. It's a terrible thing. It really is. When I read these names and where they were found, it just kind of brings tears to my eyes. They just stopped there to eat, and surprised come up behind them and hit in the head with a hammer, so their skulls were crushed and their throats were cut. Except the baby girl, which okay, it's horrible that this happened to this little baby girl. But I'm glad, because I was so afraid what they did to her. I was so afraid, and she was found with no marks on her. But so that is the story of the Bender family. I'm really interested in these old-time crimes just because of how they were handled back then. But vigilantes, can you imagine this happening now? There'd be guns everywhere. People would be shooting like crazy and blowing people up. And I cannot imagine a vigilante hunt now. Now, believe me, there's people out there I'd like to do a vigilante act on. I'm talking about animal abusers, child abusers, that kind of thing. And I'm sure other people think, my gosh, those people should just go, because I can't stand child abusers and people that kill children and animals. Those are the two biggest things right there that I think people should just be gone. So, okay, I'm off my rant. I've been laid up, so I haven't really been doing much this week to talk about. I'm going to check out Supernatural. Oh, Netflix. I started watching Worst Ex Ever. Kind of like Worst Roommate Ever. This is the same deal, but it's same show from the same people. But it's Worst Ex Ever, and it is good. I'm on the there's only 4 episodes, but they're very long. Same with the roommate one. Check that out if you haven't, because it is very good. It seemed like there was something. I started watching. I don't know if anybody out there has MGM channel. We have it on Dish Network, and I started watching the Wonderland The Wonderland Murders, if anybody knows about that, that is on my list to do sometime in Patreon and Spotify Premium. And it is a 4-episode event in MGM, on the MGM channel. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's the Wonderland Massacre, I think is the name of it. It is good. It's got the actual people on there talking about it now, like people that are still alive on there talking about it now, which is very interesting. So I just wanted to get this out there and try this without my microphone. I'm in the living room, so I'm hoping you don't hear any background noise. There's a guy that lives like catty corner to us that has an actual big motorcycle track. He's a professional motorcycle rider and very good. And he's like jumping. He goes around his track and jumps, all these hills and stuff. We can't see him, but if you drive by, you can kind of see him. But he's out there on his motorcycle, and I don't know if you can hear the revving of it. So I'm going to test this. I'm going to listen to this and see if it's any good, and I'm going to upload it. If anybody has any other suggestions, please let me know, because I really like these type of old-time crimes, and it just amazes me that these people did this. Just amazes me. Oh, okay. Happy Saturday, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. Friday the 13th was not very good for me, but hope it was for you. Have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you next time.